Hi everybody, today I would like to present a technique to you that I'm being asked about. It's pretty common, it's not something exotic, but since the effects it produces are kind of nice, some people ask about it and ask about how it's done, and that's daytime long exposure photography. Long exposure photography usually is to compensate for low light, and that would be night photography usually. And to create some effects, you can also do long exposures during the day. But to do that, you will need a few technical tools and some consideration of some aspect. Usually, we talk about long exposures when the time is, let's say, starting at 1 second. There is no common rule for that, but this is how you do it. Now, the problem is that if you have daylight, usually you will not be able to either stop down the camera to a degree where the time goes beyond 1 second, unless you use something like a filter, neutral density filters, and there are a few of them, and I will be talking about that in a few minutes. Now, what is this type of photography for? Let me just go through a few examples, and this is the most common thing: water. Moving water will turn into this kind of milky, smooth thing, and the nice thing about it is that you will have the static parts of the image, like the rocks in this case, or the branches that are sharp and detailed, and you will have the water that flows around it that will be nice and soft and smooth. So how do you achieve this? As I said, usually you will not be able. In this case, for example, the exposure time was 2.5 seconds, and it's not one of the long ones. You can go far beyond that. And in this case, I have to mention that I pushed up I stopped down the lens to f/22, which I usually don't like to do because that's outside of the optimal sharpness range of the lens. But let me talk about a few details. So, what are the settings that you have to consider for daytime long exposures? The exposure time itself depends very much on the subject you're taking pictures of, which means water, for example, fast flowing water, as in this case, this was probably also like 2.5 seconds, and there you don't have to be very, very long. In some cases, for example, for clouds, you may really want to set your camera to 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. And to achieve that, you will definitely need a filter, and I will be talking about that when we talk about the accessories that you will need. The aperture depends on the depth of field you want to achieve, and in combination with the optimal sharpness area. So usually it's in the mid-range between the maximum and minimum aperture. So that would be around, probably, depending on your lens, 5.6, 8, 11. Going beyond that will help you achieve a much longer exposure time, but will influence the sharpness. So another reason why you will need a filter, a neutral density filter. On the other hand, as you see in this example, sorry, I was focusing on these rocks in the middle, and maybe let's go to the larger one. We're focusing on these rocks in the middle, and the aperture was large enough because it was a shorter lens to achieve a decent amount of depth of field. But if you're focusing on a horizontal level more, then you will really need to stop down the lens a little bit more. It's up to you to decide what is the best combination of speed and aperture. This brings me to one important suggestion. One more aspect. That's the ISO. keep that as low as possible to achieve the best image quality possible. That's almost an obvious. So what are the suggestions that I can make and that will probably help you in getting these kinds of pictures? Obviously, you have to use a tripod. You don't have to carry around a huge tripod. What I usually do is I have this thing here, for example. This is a very small one, and it's you open it like this, and you screw it into the tripod socket of the camera, and then you can put the camera down and it will kind of move a little bit to achieve a different angle. The camera is facing to this way, for example, or that way, so you will go a little bit further up or a little bit further down with your angle of view. And this is really something that you can keep in your pocket and carry around as easily as anything. You know, it's really tiny, it's really small, it's not even that expensive. I think this one is by Manfrotto, so it's actually a good brand. I've been using this for years, really, literally. The alternative is, if you're planning on doing something like this, bring one of these. This is also Manfrotto, actually. I'm realizing this now. This is a travel tripod, mini tripod. It's good. I have a few of these. I use them for lighting too, and it has this ball head on top. By pressing this button, you release the ball head. It's not the best thing that you can have, but it's something that will help you achieve a steady hold of your camera in case of especially long exposures. So these are the things that I suggest. You can obviously use a real tripod, but that means you have to take it around with you. ND filters. Now, there are a few on the market, and some are really expensive and some have some features. What you will really need is a strong ND filter, so one that blocks out a lot of light. There are these. This is a Hama variable ND filter, 2 to 400. So technically it would really go down to a very, very strong ND filter. What I've experienced with these things is that when you reach the limit, they start having some strange defects in the image. So quite honestly, I'm not very happy with these. I have two of these, but they're kind of difficult to use, and in some cases they really mess up your picture. Now with digital, it's not so much of a problem because you see that it didn't turn out right. But honestly, you can get at very decent prices some ND filters, and ND filters are really basically dark glass, optically speaking. Now some engineers out there will tell me, no, it's by far not that simple, but it's not something that like a polarizer where you really have some optical effects, rather, and more than beyond that, and the actual darkening the image. So for example, I have this one. This is actually a slim version. I don't know if you can see it like that, and this is almost black. So this is specifically for daytime long exposure. I got this. It's 3.0 1000 times ND filter. I got it on eBay, and it's really, honestly, I can't really see any negatives about it, and I paid really, really little for this. So this is the filter part. There are other systems, and you can use, sometimes I even use larger ND filters on smaller cameras without really attaching them. The disadvantage is that you have to hold it in front of the lens for maybe a minute or something like that, but it can work. This is the important thing. What I can also suggest is take many shots, because sometimes, especially if you have an ND filter on and you use live view, or even if you have an SLR and look through the viewfinder, it's kind of hard to focus accurately. It's sometimes even hard to really compose the image accurately. So there are two options for that. You set up the image, or frame the image and set the focus before you put on the ND filter, and then you screw on the ND filter and take the photo. Or, well, you take many shots and and see and try to get it right. Another thing that I have to say concerning taking many shots, especially with long exposures, a major change like from 30 seconds to 1 minute will not have that strong effect as with regular photography. So it's basically one stop more light. You may really want to bracket your shots, or you don't have to do it automatically in camera. You can do it by setting the camera to manual. Since you have the ISO fixed, you have the aperture fixed, and you set the time manually, and try to take a few shots to get the optimal result for you. And one more thing that is really important, I don't know if it's valid for all digital cameras, but for all of mine it is, so I assume it's basically a common thing. Long exposures drain your batteries massively. You take a few, say, dozen shots and the battery can be empty. So really take that into consideration. Keep spare batteries with you. Be ready to change your batteries on a regular basis when you do long exposure photography. What else can I say about it? It's fun. It's really fun because, I mean, the common thing is water and clouds and things like that, but it can be really, really interesting to do other things like people, traffic, things like that. And depending on what you take the picture of, you really want to consider, well, using longer times, shorter times. For example, for people, if you use too long exposures, they will simply disappear, which is an interesting effect, by the way, because you take a place where it's crowded with people and you set the time to, say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and they disappear, unless they're really kind of standing still, and they will leave a shadow on the image. But moving people, moving traffic will really disappear. This leads me to one more thing, and that really depends on the camera you have. Some cameras really have a limit to 30 seconds in the settings that you can do. And then you have the bulb setting, which means as long as you hold down the shutter, the camera will expose. But to be quite honest, I never really understood how you're supposed to do that without a remote, because if you want to have the camera steady and you hold down the shutter, even if it's a long exposure with little light coming in, you may have a shake. So that is the other thing that I usually don't do, because I have cameras that either have mechanical shutter release controls or allow for longer times. One example is the Ricoh GR. That's fantastic. You can go up to, I think, 4 minutes or something like that. But otherwise, you may consider buying a remote, a cable remote. Even there, you have options like the branded ones and the secondary market ones. And I think with many of those, you can really hold down the shutter as long as you want in bulb mode, which is a setting that almost every camera has, and which will allow you to reach the target that we've set here. So what I can tell you is it's fun. It's fun to do the common things, and I would start with doing the common things to see results immediately, but then start thinking where you could go with this, what you could do. Water is one thing, but water doesn't necessarily have to be a creek or a stream. It can be a puddle of water, a fountain, things like that, or people, moving people. There are so many things that when you slow them down, which is basically what you do here, it really give you effects that are really interesting. So I hope I could give you some hints and some inspiration with this, and I hope to see you back here soon. Subscribe if you like, the usual stuff, like if you like, and have a great day. Bye bye.